Welcome to Dare to be Legendary, a Daversa Partners podcast. Each episode, we feature conversations with some of the brightest minds in tech, including founders, executives, and investors who are entirely disrupting this generation's ecosystem. They are the ones who dare to be legendary. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Dare to be Legendary. Today, we're sitting down with the renowned Dr. Robert Zambrowski. Many of you may know him as the author of Rebuild, but more importantly, he's a highly regarded functional medicine doctor, chiropractic neurologist, and clinical nutritionist. A self-proclaimed freak for mechanisms, research, and piecing together the clues that create poor health and disease. Dr. Z, as his patients call him, is redefining what preventative care and long-term health looks like in this modern world. Dr. Z, thanks so much for joining us today.
Nicole, thanks for having me on the show.
So aside from being a functional medicine practitioner and author, you are also a cancer survivor. Your book, Rebuild, is about how people can literally rebuild themselves even from the most terrifying state of health. And what I find most interesting about you is really your own story and what you've survived. So why don't we start there and how your own experiences have led you to where you are today and how you've come out better for it on the other side?
Well, at an incredible busy time in my career and certainly in my practice, I heard the words, "You have a 5-inch tumor in your chest." And at the time, on different TV shows and different podcasts, different outlets out there, I always say this and I get a response out of people that when I heard those words, I had a 5-inch tumor in my chest, I got angry at myself. And people always say, why? And I said, well, and there's a backstory to this, and I'll get into that. But my anger became a reality that I was a critical player in the creation of my disease. And you'll soon find out how and why. But my anger quickly shifted to motivation, right? Saying, I can't believe that I've actually compromised my system enough to create a pathology. Now, what do I do? So after hearing those words, I realized that I was in trouble with my health. Now, here's the backstory. 18 months, 2 years previous to that, super busy in the practice. My neurology career and business was really taking off. I had a front desk person who was actually stealing from me and insurance companies to support a very well-hidden heroin addiction. At the same time, I had purchased a bigger home for myself. I was in a relationship that I thought was going somewhere. It ended up turning out to be very caustic and unhealthy. And all this was happening all at once. And I remember the time looking at the tumor in the x-ray on my chest, thinking about what I've put myself through over the last 2 years, 2.5 years, thinking that I didn't control my environment. And the stress, Nicole, was out of control. I literally for 6 months had gut problems. Basically diarrhea. I was drinking myself to sedate myself to sleep. I was on the run. I was eating, I don't want to say junk food, but fast foods because I couldn't think about anything other than how do I survive all of this? And basically, at night, I would stare at the ceiling with my stomach and not thinking to myself that my career was over, my practice is over. I can't believe I didn't, control my staff. I didn't really realize what was happening. Then to make a long story short, 18 months later, after I got rid of the relationship, I got rid of the fraudulent criminal in the office, all of the smoke cleared. However, I started to lose weight 2 years later. I started to lose strength in the gym. No B vitamins and caffeine were supporting me through this energy crisis I was having. I would bend over, Nicole, and have severe head pain. I said, something's not right. So I drew some blood on myself and I chalked it up to, I just went through years of stress and I probably just have adrenal fatigue and no big deal. But when I drew the blood and I saw an enzyme called lactate dehydrogenase, like 5 times the normal value, I knew I was in trouble. So I reached out to a friend of mine, Len, who has a big radiology clinic up the street. And the morning before the x-ray, I was getting severe night sweats. And I woke up one morning and my left pupil was the size of a Frisbee. So I said, okay, now I'm dying, and which I was. So I ended up at Len's office and he said, Rob, let's take an x-ray of your chest. And that's when I heard the words, you have a 5-inch tumor in your chest. So my head spiraled into this. I can't believe I didn't control my past. I saw signals. My relationship was horrible, but I stayed in it. I literally didn't take care of myself or manage the way that I took care of stressors as we teach people to do now. So I basically had to go through chemotherapy. People will say to me, oh my God, you're in great shape. Did you do it naturally? I'm like, no. And so I needed medical intervention. I needed that technology actually to start killing cancer cells. The cancer was non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So I had 3 months of hell of that. And then I dove into the research to understand more so of why I developed it. What are things I can do to support my system through it all? So after the 3 months, technically the cancer wasn't gone. It was just maximally minimized, if you will. So I was doing intravenous vitamin C. I was swallowing herbs from all over the planet. I was doing everything possible to, one, keep it at bay, and two, try to rebuild myself in between. In the same time, Nicole, I was digging through research like an absolute crazed man. I needed to understand on a cellular level, a genetic level, what happened to me. So the time came where I needed another PET scan. So I went to the oncology group that I was seeing, and they said, let's do another PET scan. It's like, oh, there's still activity in your chest. So it was behind my sternum, the mediastinal region. Mediastinum, actually, was a 5-inch soft tissue tumor. So I said, I can't believe I have to do this again. I actually have to get chemotherapy again. This time, I was armed with research. I was armed with what to do to make the chemo more effective and less toxic. So the next round of chemo was, I don't want to say very simple, but it actually was. Because through my research, I understood on a biochemical level, what can I do to make the chemo more effective and less toxic, which I discovered and I applied it to myself. Now, they called me the freak at the local hospitals because they couldn't understand why I was doing so well with what they call the quote unquote most toxic chemicals out there. When I got done with the infusion, I said, I have to go because I have to go to the gym. And they're like, wow, you are a freak. So all said and done, when I got done with the chemo, the follow-up PET scan still showed activity in my chest. And I'm sitting there saying, okay, it didn't spread. We kept it at bay. Now what? And the oncology group, which was just, it was like I was part of an algorithm. I was part of a, drop-down menu, wash, rinse, repeat. The oncology team said to me, why don't we do a mini stem cell transplant? And I go, mini stem cell transplant, like mini donuts? I don't know what you're saying here. So I dove back into the research to make any decision. And I realized that a stem cell transplant for my situation would not work. So I went back to the team and I said, nope, I don't want to have that done. I won't survive that. I'm not going to survive anyway because of the cancer, but I'm not going to survive that. I said, why don't we do surgery? And they said, we don't do surgery on this type of tumor, on this type of cancer. And so I said, well, why not? Why don't we do something outside of the box, what you normally do? And so 7 days later, a thoracic surgeon called me and said, Rob, if you let me open you up, you'll never have disease in your chest again. 7 days or 10 days after that, cut open my chest, remove this mass. And I remember when my eyes opened, the first thing I thought about in a groggy state with tubes stuffed through my ribs into my lungs with these cannonballs of painkillers sticking out of my belly, it's time to rebuild. I will never, ever let myself get into a situation like that again. And I'm going to rebuild myself to a place of health that was better than it was before. And this August, it'll be 15 years, and I am a cancer victor and completely in excellent health.
Such an incredible journey. And I think one of the points that you touched upon, which we will talk about later, is kind of the notion of ignoring lesser symptoms, right? So be it stress, anxiety, or gut problems, that I think will play a huge role in what we talk about. But it also sounds like, from your point of view, removing the tumor was not always the first option, right? It was the riskier option. And I'm sure as it pertains to your own journey, that was probably an inflection point for you. And also, you've been to medical school, you're a trained doctor. What made you end up, pushing for that? What made you make that decision and say, yes, take it out?
As I think about that question, I tell all of my patients all over the world, from all different, walks of life, that you have to really be your own self-advocate. You have to be a personal advocate for yourself, because if you don't, then we just leave it up to, we rely on individuals that don't really know us and our capabilities of what we can do for ourselves. And part of that advocacy was, I did my homework. I did my research. I looked into this and saying, your procedures won't work for me. Instead of following a blind eye through all of this, I was an active participant in understanding, one, my disease, but number two, what will work and what won't work. And why didn't the chemotherapy completely obliterate all of it, rather than when they removed it, it was just a giant cannonball of scar tissue, as they say, with a little bit of lymphoma in the center of it. And I said, well, we're on the right track, because it became scar tissue rather than disease. So I said, well, what's the difference? I pushed them to do a procedure that they didn't normally do. One, I'm a persistent son of a gun. And two, I was a risk taker, saying, I know you say that you've never done it before, but why not? Why not use me as an example? I'm not going to survive it anyway. So the thoracic surgeon said, you got a point. Why don't we do this? And so they actually did it. I survived the surgery. I rebuilt myself back to excellence. And the last time I talked to anybody up there, they're saying, hey, now we're using the Zambrowski protocol and cutting open chests when there's a mediastinal tumor there. So I think, yes, my training, but my persistence to understand more, which is really what got me into more functional medicine, which I know we'll talk about. But I needed to know how it works. I needed to know on a cellular genetic level, will it work? Won't it work? So I guess it was my push through, one, because I have education there, but it was courage. It was my personality. It was really the push for my own personal survival, but my own want to understand it and how I can help others essentially in the future.
And I think the standout phrase that you mentioned is that you were an advocate for yourself. And I think a lot of people will resonate with that, because it's really easy to get lost in this current healthcare system that we have. Let's move to kind of more present day, right? So the functional medicine practice that you've built, and when you're treating a patient, and I do know this will be different patient to patient, but what does a successful Dr. Z protocol look like?
So patients will typically come to me with searching for other answers, because the standards of medical care haven't provided those answers. People will also come in with like bags of files, bags of data, bags of files of objective medical tests that we often see aren't related to the individual's issues. It's the standard of care that people go through, whether it's a standard physical exam for blood work. Men and women are getting hormones tested, but it's not, for women, it's not being tested on a specific time of the month. So all the data points that they're presenting with doesn't match really who they are and what they suffer from. So I realize that, just like myself, all people have a unique genetic blueprint, a unique set of factors, Nicole, that actually dictate health or disease in that individual, in you as an individual. Rather than treating the person, I look for pieces of altered and dysfunctional, or what I call broken physiology, that sets the stage for individuals' health issues, unresolved chronic health issues, or disease. So two people may receive the same diagnosis for a chronic health issue or a disease, but the underlying reasons, the biochemical reasons behind those diagnoses may be different. Let's take this for example. Let's take anxiety. You're diagnosed with anxiety based on a list of symptoms. And I know there's a million different health issues out there, but let's take anxiety because actually we're seeing quite a bit of it now in this day and age. There are known genetic dysfunctions that can lead to anxiety. For example, MTHFR mutations for one. Someone else may have a dysfunction in a gene called GAD1. Not to get too technical here. The diagnosis is anxiety, but the cause is different in two different people. To rebuild those individuals, we do all the proper tests. I do all the proper testing, which is needed to help identify and formulate the fix. Rather than throw drugs like lorazepam at somebody with anxiety, I look for the fundamental physical reasons why someone may be suffering. Now, the physiological reasons behind those issues are unique to the individual. but we focus on looking for those reasons. I look for those physical reasons, which goes way beyond, Nicole, like a standard medical exam, your medical evaluation. Now, from those objective tests and the data that I receive from the tests, I actually create a very unique treatment plan to rebuild those dysfunctional pathways. A lot of the times, the rebuild is a lifestyle modification. It's a mindset change. It's a set of natural nutraceuticals, which are just as powerful as pharmaceuticals to influence those pathways for higher function. And sometimes we send people out for medications because medications are needed. So it's really set up to be very unique to the individual, and the treatment and the rebuild plan is very unique to the individual. And again, all of that is not based on someone's name diagnosis, but the data points that we get from objective testing. It becomes very unique. And that's how we treat everyone as an individual, not as a set of diagnosis, but we treat every person as a unique individual with their blueprint, with their genetic blueprint and all the objective findings that we find. It's fascinating what we're seeing improve. Fascinating.
Right. And I think one of the great points you made is that the current state of our healthcare system is very much focused on reactive healthcare or crisis care. And to your point, I think there's probably millions of people out there that are saying, I have anxiety, thus I have anxiety, versus digging a level deeper and understanding what genetic markers specifically to them may be causing that. And I think one of the things I'm most curious about is why people are not acutely focused on this preventative care and going a level deeper, right? So if we knew that we could prevent something as small as anxiety or as large as cancer, ALS, or an autoimmune disease from developing later in life, why aren't more people doing this? And why hasn't the medical profession and the functional medicine profession intertwined yet? Because I'd imagine that would be sort of this utopian perfect world.
It would. And we always say that, one, it's hard to say what's behind someone's mindset to actually take an action to create prevention, right? As I tell everyone all the time, it's easier to rebuild your health now than to treat it when it fails. And as I've stated in my book, Rebuild, I mean, there's three basic reasons why people don't actually take action for themselves to, if you want to say, prevent disease or rebuild from one or seek those that can help them rebuild. People don't change for three reasons: pain, physical pain, emotional pain, spiritual pain. Until people actually experience some form of pain in that sense, do I find clinically here that people don't take action for themselves. And why hasn't the medical world caught up with like the standard medical care or the standard medical profession? Why hasn't it married into functional medicine? I think it is. And functional medicine is an archaeological dig. Functional medicine is not. Standard medical care is crisis care. When there's a fire, we call the firemen. They come, they turn the water on, they put the fire out, they drive home. Typically, that's crisis care medicine in this country. As time goes on, though, I think the demand for it, society is demanding something more. Young or old, it doesn't matter. We're demanding more, one, truthful information and research so we can make informed decisions properly for ourselves. Again, as you said, patient advocacy, as we said, patient advocacy before. But I think the medical world is actually catching up because people are demanding more than just a pharmaceutical, are demanding more than a treatment of a named diagnosis. So the functional medicine is an archaeological dig to understand why people have what they have. Medicine really says we're going to use a pharmaceutical or some other agent to change a system in the body to change a symptom, right? And that's typically how it works. Check this out. Hospital errors, Nicole, are the third leading cause of death in the country, trailing heart disease and cancer. It's the third leading cause of death because of misdiagnosis, because of poor note-taking, because of wrong prescription drug interventions. Data out of the Journal of Patient Safety. This is real information. They say close to 400,000 people die every year from medical errors. Now, I'm not bashing them. Hear the words. I'm saying that medical errors, because of the old standard ways of treatment, have the potential to cause harm. It also, medicine saves lives. It saved my life. I'm not saying that it doesn't work. But the medical world, as we have all discussed in the past, is really trained for crisis care. It's symptom care. They practice through their set of lenses. Again, when there's a fire, the firemen put the fire out. But what are people doing to rebuild from that? And I also think society has been geared up to deal with health issues only when they arise. And I can ask you as a young adult, what would make you focus on your health? What would make you, get to the doctors to understand your health more so? Is it a symptom? Is it fatigue? Is it you're not feeling well? So I definitely think that there's more of a trend now where practitioners globally, again, as we see people all over the world, are opening their minds to say there's something more than just treating a diagnosis. There's more to treating people than symptoms and just a generalized physical exam. So the algorithm way of treating people still exists. It's still the main way it exists. But I think as time goes on, because of the demand of people and the information highway out there, and again, the access people have of information on the internet and in the world is making people want more. And when they want more, change is happening in the healthcare industry.
And I think when you look just kind of even outside of healthcare, right, there are these really large systems that take much longer to evolve. We'll look back now and say, oh, this is archaic, right? So be it healthcare, be it logistics, be it government infrastructure, it seems like these larger systems stay anchored on what's set maybe 50 years ago versus advancing quicker than, the technology that we have today.
Yes, exactly. And that's, again, I think there's a shift happening, but you're right. The wash, rinse, repeat, things are algorithms. This is how we're taught to do things. This is how we treat a specific problem. And again, whether it's governmental, whether it's big corporation, whether it's industry, whatever it is, what's fascinating to me, which is very cool, and I love it, people are forcing change. People are forcing change in the healthcare industry, certainly in the tech world for sure, but in the healthcare industry, and we see it all the time, where people will come in so educated, and it's so awesome that, quite frankly, it's a lot less work on our part because people come in educated and they're looking for the right guidance. They're looking for the quarterback that can actually guide them through an unresolved chronic health issue or through a disease or a medical treatment because they don't know what direction to go in. So I agree. I mean, I think as time goes on, we are definitely seeing a fundamental shift in healthcare, but more so in the mindsets of the public. I love it. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and I certainly agree with you on that. I think, at least from my own perspective, throughout the last 24 months, I feel like the silver lining of this pandemic has actually given people back the power of their own health and wellness. So while we may not have been able to be in office or in school, we were able to take some of that power back and focus on mental health, physical well-being. And you also brought up tech. So maybe I'll switch a little bit and see if we can dream a little and kind of bring your world of functional medicine into my world, which is tech, because I do think there are a number of disruptive health tech companies out there, but I'd love to get your opinion on where do you think the place of functional medicine is inside the world of tech and how do we leverage the two together?
That's a good question. I would tend to say that the functional medicine is the wave of the future as far as healthcare. Disease management, healthcare, again, because it looks at the underlying roots of why people get ill, whether it's a genetic problem, whether it's a hormonal problem, whether it's a dysfunction in the gut, a systemic immune response, whatever it may be. Functional medicine is forcing change into a society of old antiquated care saying, why are we the way we are? Why are we developing disease? Unfortunately, I don't think there's enough integration of the underlying physical dysfunctions and simple technology. As technology advances, there's an opportunity for tech to use principles of functional medicine. I think creating a user-friendly interface or platform that allows users to really understand their health and what potential causes of those health issues can be. Currently, I think technology allows people to focus more on healthy actions and activity, while providing data points to keep them focused. I don't think there's enough understanding of physiology or people that's creating the tech in physiology in the current space and how to integrate that into a user-friendly applications. I'm not saying it's not there. The digital twin technology, as you know, the process is exciting as it provides individuals with data points about their metabolic function and how to work with potentially healthcare providers to help manage those issues to resolve metabolic problems like diabetes. So I think we're moving in the right direction. The fundamental technology already exists. Nicole, you've had blood work done, correct?
Of course.
You've had a physical exam done. We've had, maybe people have had EKGs done. We've had hormone profiling done. There's genetic testing people can do. Technology exists to create or find the data points in someone's failing health. We have saliva and urine to determine hormone abnormalities. You can look at vitamin D levels from a finger prick with a drop of blood. I can tell you why you have pregnancy issues with a simple genetic test. Or again, as we said, why you have anxiety through genetic testing, or maybe why you can't lose weight through simple gene testing. My point is, a lot of the diagnostic technology exists. I would love to integrate technology out there, a user-friendly application that combines it that allows people a greater understanding of their health issues and what they can do to resolve the health issues. So in a long roundabout way to answer your question, I really think that functional medicine is molding itself, marrying itself with current user-face technologies, artificial intelligence, things that would make it easier for people to understand what's wrong with themselves and certainly to provide actions to rebuild themselves. It's right here. It's really right here. 2022, 2023. We're right on the fringe of some pretty cool stuff.
I love your point about data points because we're living in a world where we actually consume all of these data points. What you're saying is, it sounds like over the next several years, this merging of worlds between functional and traditional medicine, it'll be taking those data points and helping the individual interpret them. Because what do these data points do if the information doesn't empower us? So if we don't have a granular understanding of, oh, this is what my resting heart rate might mean, or hey, I burned this many calories during my workout. Those are great, but it doesn't necessarily go a layer deeper, which
Right.
It sounds like these two worlds will combine.
I agree 100%. So maybe if I paint a couple of quick stories, it will maybe make sense what's in my brain. But clinically, from a clinical experience, my observations with data points and technology, there's basically pros and cons. And so maybe this is a haphazard way to answer your question, but unfortunately, the data that comes from some of the apps or the simple technology, Nicole, gives you data points, as you said before, but it doesn't tell you why. For example, let's say you're looking at a heart rate variability. Awesome that we can look at heart rate variabilities, whether it's a watch, whether it's an app, whatever it is. In a heart rate variability, it will show you that there's something different. It will show you that there's something wrong, perhaps, but it doesn't tell you why. Maybe it's a magnesium deficiency, or maybe you have a dysfunction in the SA node of the heart. So your heart rate variability is your heart rate is off, right? It won't tell the user there's a dysfunction in the nervous system that can drive an abnormal heart rate. A quick story. A patient of mine, Bob, this guy was a serious rower. He'd get up at 4:30 in the morning, be on the water for 2 or 3 hours. I said, Bob, you're like killing yourself. He would literally be on the water for hours, stressed and over-exercising. What the device that he used, the watch provided his heart rate. After the rowing, Nicole, his heart rate would stay at like 160 beats per minute for like an hour, which is a major serious situation. So I said, Bob, listen, something's not right. Let's send you to a cardiologist. And they actually found right ventricular hypertrophy, which basically means the right side of the heart was abnormally large. And the enlargement of that right ventricle, if you will, created abnormal firing of the nerves of the heart and elevated heart rate. So he had to be medicated. So he used a drug called flecainide, and it actually, regulated his heart rate. So I think that the pro here is it gives people data points on different aspects of their physiology, their function, but it doesn't tell the user why. So I also see this guy, Lee, as a friend of ours, an electrician. I don't know if you've heard of, everybody's heard about Peloton, but have you heard about this exercise device called Tonal?
Yes, I have.
Now, I'm a typical old-fashioned gym rat. Dust, chalk, lift heavy weights, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And this guy, you know what I mean? And this guy, Lee, says, Rob, this physiology stuff, come over and try this. I was absolutely blown away that a device can detect the amount of pressure you put into it, the artificial intelligence it has. You can connect with trainers all over the world. You can program it for any kind of workout you want. To me, the technology is absolutely mind-blowing. So in the sense, and this guy is addicted to data points. You know people who do that. Like, I had 5,000 steps today, and they're competing with their friends.
Absolutely.
And that's awesome because it keeps you focused on health. It gets you motivated with a group of people, power in the herd. And it's cool to compete with others. So it gives information. Technology now, or the tech, is actually providing data points that give us some information objectively about our function. The issue is it doesn't tell us why. Now, Lee, who's got this Tonal, he's addicted to the graphs and the data points. I go, Lee, what does it mean? It doesn't matter, Rob. I got to 1,000,000 pounds lifting.
Of course.
So I go, Lee, aren't you concerned about what it's doing? He goes, yeah, but you tell me that. So the high intensity interval training that you can do with it, the magic is in the why. So if we can create the technology to tell people the why, technology will be a grand slam from the data points that come from even just the simple technology we have today. Whether it's Whoop with recovery capabilities, heart rate variabilities, whether it's the Peloton or whether it's Tonal, these different things are allowing us to create or find data points for ourselves. So the pros are all there. That's obvious. The cons are it doesn't tell us why. And I guess another awesome pro, if you will, positive is, say, this guy, Bob, who was a rower, right? The technology, Nicole, told him that he was in tachycardia. His heart rate was out of control, which then he sought help for, which then he got the proper help for. So I think the tech and the functional medicine and physiology still need a lot of catching up to do. But I think it's putting us on the right path that these data points can actually help people get the help that they need if something shows up. And we also see people with anxiety issues that their apps are saying, I'm not sleeping through the night. What's wrong with me? I'm not sleeping. Christina, calm down. We'll figure it out why. So some of the data points are actually providing information to people because they don't know what it means and what to do with it is slightly creating more anxiety. They don't know the underlying reasons why they may have some of these objective findings show up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's actually a really great point. For someone that wakes up, looks at their sleep chart based on their Whoop recovery band or whatever wearable it might be, and doesn't understand how to arm themselves with this information, it has the reverse effect. It's disinformation. It's not empowering them, and they don't know how to interpret it.
And I agree 100%. If your basal metabolic rate changes, what does it really mean? What does it do for people? If you find that you've lost 8 pounds of body weight, was it water or was it muscle weight? Did you change your blood sugar in glycogen stores? And, when people modify their lifestyles, diets, and the food intake, you reduce the sugar that you take in and you ultimately get rid of water weight. A gallon of water is 8 pounds. So the tech will tell you weight loss. It'll tell you caloric, basal metabolic needs, recovery rates, heart rate variabilities. It'll tell you metabolically hemoglobin A1C values. But why? Why are these things happening? I personally think functional medicine with technology, we can create superhumans.
Wouldn't it be great to see whether it's the Mirror or Tonal or Peloton to have someone like you integrated into that where it's like, hey, this ride is specific to your physiology. Because when you think about it, it's really hard to personalize specifically workouts, what we eat, what diet is correct for me versus you. I think there's a ton of opportunity for growth as it pertains to functional medicine and tech. Just to kind of bring this conversation full circle in terms of where we started, how do you prevent something from happening 10 to 15 years down the line? And maybe you could also talk a bit to our younger audience, because I think a really healthy 26-year-old or a really healthy 34-year-old, whatever age you may pick, they're not necessarily thinking about preventative care because nothing feels wrong in this moment.
You know what? It's a good point. As you were asking the question and you say people 26 to 34 to, 20 to 35, 40, they don't have a health issue that you know of, right? I didn't realize that I had a 5-inch tumor growing until my nervous system and my body were picking up the signals. So for one, I think people have to get away from the notion or thought that I'm well if I have no symptoms, right? Most people will sit there and say, I'm healthy. My standard medical exam, my blood work and, blood pressure, I'm healthy. Not really. Those are only some data points. But I think we have to really get people in the mindset to think outside of having a symptom rather than saying, what can I do to, as you said, prevent issues? I've been in this field for 30 years. As I see and as I've stated in my book, Rebuild, many people don't focus on their health until it's threatened or taken away. Now, I can ask you as a young adult, Nicole, what are you doing to prevent? Why would you want to prevent something? I'm just going to throw that back at you and then come back to more comments. What is it about you that would say, why am I concerned about prevention?
Right.
Why would I want to do things proactively to prevent a healthcare problem? I'm putting you on the spot.
I think that's a hard thing to do without inducing mass panic, because I think for a lot of young people that feel really healthy, including myself, I lump myself into that where it's like, well, I don't think anything's wrong because I feel good. I know I need to change that mindset, but I also think a scary conversation to have because the unknown, right? Why would I want to prevent something now versus 10 to 15 years down the line? Based on family history, I've seen family members fight cancer and it's a really tough battle. In my opinion, fight it now. My body is strong. My body's younger than it will be in 10 to 15 years. So I couldn't imagine a better time than to take any type of health issue, be it minor or serious, head on in this moment.
No, that is an awesome point. And you said something that was really key, and I hope that resonates with people. You have a personal experience with health crisis with family.
Yep.
Right? So it's an emotional drive for you to say, I don't want those things to occur in me in the future. Therefore, what are the simple things I can do now to keep my biology, my physiology working the way it was meant to work? Yeah, we get a cold, we get a virus here and there, we have an upset stomach once in a while. That's normal stuff. But again, you have a personal connection to why you would be proactive. And again, as I said, a lot of people don't focus on their health until it's threatened or taken away. Remember, it's emotional pain, spiritual pain, physical pain. Think about what I call the health to wealth ratio. Whether you're young or older, it doesn't matter. More people, in my opinion and clinical experience, are very geared up in success, careers, making good money for themselves so they can have financial freedom in the future. That does you no good if you're impaired. That does you no good if you can't walk. That does you no good if you're on a world of medications or a boatload of medications that you had the potential to prevent for the future. We see a lot of young adults, we'll go with your age of 26 to 34, 35, a lot of people, again, with anxieties. And I think a lot of young adults are super focused on careers, securing a good job. They financially want to succeed. And maybe people are starting to think about a family. But in my experience, young adults are motivated to seek help or seek health information or find health information if and when it's relevant to them.
I couldn't agree more.
You just said you have a personal experience. You want to stay well so you don't have to deal with those experiences, right? And I think for many young adults, again, in my experience, search for information about their health based on media coverage, internet things that we read through technology, inflammatory headlines. And I guess the big thing for me with young adults, and I agree with you 100%, if you do the simple things now, you can remain insanely healthy for a long time so you're not dealing with a crisis. It becomes relevance. and I guess that's the word to pull from this, is it relevant to you at this time? It's easier to rebuild your health than to prevent a crisis when it happens. So a lot of the people that we see, young adults, again, in the mindset of, as we're talking about young adults, it really becomes a mindset. What are you valuing? What do you want to have happen? Are you a data point gatherer? Do you want to prevent things from happening? Are you a risk taker? People are also risk adverse, and people, say, I'm not at high risk. Who cares? Kind of thing. It's the perception of low risk and low personal risk, I think, as well.
I am someone I think would rather go jump out of a plane and go skydiving than go get an MRI to see what is wrong because I'm terrified of what the results might show. And that's just me personally. But being adverse to your own health is actually a really toxic trait and quality because you're not empowering yourself. And by doing so, if you did empower yourself and you did have these data points early on, you'd eventually be able to, hopefully transform what 5, 10, 15 years down the line of your life looks like.
Absolutely. And as I said, most people don't focus on their health until it's threatened, right? If you think about it, health, Nicole, is abstract. Normal physiological functioning is not tangible. You can't feel it. If I said to you, tell me what your white blood cells are doing to fight infection, you say, I have no idea. Can you actually feel blood circulate through your veins? Are you feeling, the immune response getting rid of unwanted pathogens through the digestion of food? No. Can you feel your skin heal? No. So healthy physical process, healthy biological process, if you think about it, is really abstract. You can't smell it, taste it, get high from it. You can't drive it fast. You can't jump out of a plane with it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But this is where I think tech really plays an awesome role, like the Apple Watches, the Fitbits, the Whoop apps, the tonal machines. It gives people, for those looking for data points, a way to engage in fun, and I should say addictive technology, addictive behavior. I mean, who doesn't like to swipe their thumb and find something at the end of the result, right? But also a better understanding of what they can do to be proactive at improving their health. And again, I think in the tech and functional medicine world, that would be a huge takeaway.
I totally agree. And I could be a little off on these numbers, but I think for Gen Z and millennials, the average floating stat is that we spend 4.5 hours a day on our phone engaged in some sort of app, mostly social media. But imagine if we could take that time, if there was an app versus scrolling through Instagram, personalized to you or me or anyone else out there, right? So taking all this time we spend in this digital age and actually turning it around to benefit us.
Yeah. And to your point, which I appreciate that. If you look at social media per se, you swipe your finger, you see a picture. You swipe an ad, you swipe, quick, tweet is a quick tweet, 140 character. That's called a dopamine rush. It's a flash in the pan of dopamine. So our brains start to replasticize themselves and re-network themselves when we are exposed to this stuff day in and day out, right? Why is it that we get a reward system when we look at an app, when we look at Instagram, when we see a post, when we see an inflammatory headline? It's technology is also changing the way the brain is functioning. It's changing hormones. It's changing neurotransmitters. What's the detriment, Nicole, to that? Insecurities are heightened. Anxiety levels raised. So again, there's so many pros and cons to all of this. But social media to me is that dopamine flash in the pan. Boom, it was exciting. So technology is also changing our physiology.
So last topic here is really about mental health and nutrition and how those two aspects play a role in understanding our personal DNA blockchain. Because I think you are quite literally living proof that someone can make themselves sick with stress, but also heal from it. So maybe touch a little bit upon what our relationship with mental well-being plays as it relates to disease and prevention and healing.
Now, I like DNA blockchain. Can I use that? Did you trademark that?
Go ahead and use it. I'm not a functional medicine doctor.
No, I love it. It's just like people say, oh, you're a cancer survivor. No, I'm a cancer victor. Anybody that may hear this just quickly as a note, you didn't survive, you won the war. So cancer victor, you're a cancer victor. So it is a play on words, but certainly those play on words is really just a change of mindset. But I do love the DNA blockchain. Think about this. Can you worry yourself sick?
100%. Everyone probably at one point of their life or not has either harped on something that has yet to happen or harped on a moment that has happened, right? Inevitably creating some sense of stress, anxiety, guilt, whatever it may be.
Great point. Great point. Can you improve your health by changing your mindset? When I woke up after they cut my chest open from throat to belly, the only thing that I thought of was rebuilding. And the words, rang like a bell in my head. If you let me open you up, you'll never have cancer there again, right? So it starts the healing process. What's the placebo effect? We hear about it. Do people really know what it is? We're going to do a controlled study. We're going to give this person a drug to treat this certain thing in the body. And we're going to give people sugar pills. But we're going to tell the people with sugar pills that it's the most powerful drug on the planet to heal them. The placebo effect is real. And what they're showing in the research is, if I tell you that you're going to get through something, you're going to heal through a chronic unresolved health issue, you're going to rebuild from a disease, they're showing that the endocrine system, the nervous system, the hormonal system actually releases beneficial hormones. It modifies the immune response, Nicole, to start healing. So we know for a fact that the mindset is really where everything begins. You can worry yourself sick. It'd be naive to think that we couldn't change our mindset for positive healing. Our conscious thoughts can put us in a position of healing and positive actions. And as you said, maybe in old conditioning, that's the unconscious mind, the programmed mind. And our learned experiences create a behavioral response to something from the past, perhaps, our unconscious mind, which sets up the nervous system and hormonal system to increase the surge of damaging stress hormones like cortisol. I mean, it obliterated my immune response. Thoughts are electrical. Thoughts and emotions are vibrational. Your thoughts activate different aspects of your nervous system. This has been proven. And your hormonal system, which obviously can improve your health and put you closer to disease. I mean, look at my story, as you mentioned before. There's 2 phenomenal books. That is an awesome read about how your mindset changes your genes, how a mindset changes vibration and electrical activities in the body, which is really about epigenetics. Epigenetics is the science of an outside influence, whether it's a mindset, whether it's a nutrient. Nutrients can change the way genes respond, right? So if I were to give you folate, it would make specific genes work more efficiently. And if those genes work more efficiently, you would reduce anxiety chemicals like norepinephrine, dopamine, and so forth. So epigenetics is a science of modifying genes based on a stimulus. And that stimulus could be a thought, it could be a nutrient, any of those things. But my point is, there's 2 phenomenal books. The Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton is an awesome read on how thoughts change genetic function and different systems in your body. And there was another one, The Genie in Your Genes by Dawson Church, where he describes how your mind and intention can influence your genetic blueprint, basically to improve your health. Now, that doesn't mean positive thoughts lead to a cure, but it certainly puts you in the right direction. Everything to get you to a better place in your health and certainly emotionally in life is based on a mindset.
Our minds are really powerful. And if we can understand that and understand how to leverage that in a positive way, I think there's a world of good that would come from that, starting at the very simplest level of health.
I agree. And if you remember Tobey Maguire when he played Spider-Man, Dr. Octopus, before he got those metal arms welded to his spinal cord, he was manipulating that little ball of whatever energy thing. And he said something that resonated with me as, of course, I'm a comic book geek. But as he's manipulating this ball of energy in his hand, he said, the power of the sun is in my hands. And I think about it, it's like the power of health, the power of this abstract superhuman quality we have, health, is in our hands. We have the ability to change our minds. We have the ability to change our perceptions. We have the ability to take proper actions, maybe from technology data points, but certainly what data we do have to alter our physiology, to rebuild ourselves back to excellent health. So the power of your health is really in your hands.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And for our listeners who want to learn more about functional medicine or Dr. Z himself, you can find him at drzembrowski.com. That's DRZEMBROSKI.com. And his book, Rebuild, is available on Amazon. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me, Nicole. Thanks very much.
Thanks for listening to Dare to be Legendary, brought to you by Daversa Partners. Feel free to check out the show notes for resources that we've mentioned throughout the episode. If you like what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, share with friends, and leave us a review. This helps us get content to more listeners like you. Thanks again, and stay tuned for our next episode.